It is now 6 o'clock, and I will call the February 14th, 2023 City Commission meeting to order. We'll begin with the roll call.
Mayor Hattasol,
Here.
Commissioner Reddy,
Present.
Commissioner Butler,
Here.
Mr. Mata,
Here.
Commissioner Morris.
Present.
We have a quorum.
All right.
Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business is to decide if we want to allow public comment at our work session tonight. I see there's a lot of demand for it. Is there a motion one way or another?
I move we allow public comment if any member of the public comes.
Okay.
They'd be welcome to do that.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to allow for public comment. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Reddy,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Mata,
Yes.
Commissioner Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Hattasol.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, very good. We will begin the work session then with our one item, which is to discuss the proposed Parks and Recreation cost recovery approach and proposed changes to the Parks and Recreation draft fee resolution, pricing, and cost recovery policy.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Chris Curtis. I'm the Recreation Superintendent with the Manhattan Parks and Recreation Department. I've been on the job for 6 months tomorrow. My 6-month reviews is due this week, so we'll see how that goes. But so a couple of things have been my focus since I came on board, and one was obviously getting our staffing levels back to good levels where we want them to be. The other thing is the passage and implementation of this policy. Both of those items, both our staffing and the cost recovery and pricing policy, are obviously tantamount to moving forward and doing the things that I want to do in our department. So having said that, we'll jump right in to what we've been doing since probably about September. This is kind of the process we adopted. We formed a core team and went through all of our current program offerings, all of our facility situations, rentals, fields, all the things that we do, and use those situations to compare to our community benefit model, which we'll go into in here a little bit more in detail. The next step was then to take all of what we looked at, all of our current offerings, and categorize those into programs or that can be used to put into tiers on the pyramid level, which, as I said, we'll get to here in a second. And then thirdly, attach a cost recovery level to each tier, and then develop the revenue and pricing policy, which you have the draft of in your packets. There are several filters that we looked at through this process. So I've already mentioned kind of the community benefits. So the basic principle and the guiding principle of this policy is the community benefit. Who benefits from the service, therefore who should pay for the most for that service. We looked at commitment. What's the intensity of the program? How many sessions does it meet? What's the level of instruction, things like that. Is it a tried and true program? Is something that should be a base of our program offerings, or if it's more of a fad that may take a large investment to get involved in? So that's another one of the filters we looked at. Is it an obligation? Are we required to do it by federal mandate or by some other law, i.e. ADA? And then, of course, market is a big part of it. I'll come back to that later in the presentation as well. What's the effect of the program in attracting customers? Is it in our base or foundation of our offerings? What's the relative cost? And I make this mention, I think I'm old enough to remember Kmart, and you had the blue light special. It was our loss leader. So if we can offer some program that gets a lot of people in the door, and hopefully we can cross-sell them on something else without spending a lot of money or resources, then we may look at that. Is there an environmental impact? what's the political forces. Obviously, I'm well aware that, in Manhattan, we value access to the swimming pools, so we looked at that and obviously didn't make any recommendations for any of the fees in that regard. And then who we serve, who is our core audience, who are we trying to attract to our program? So we want to be aware of all of those filters. And so, as I said, the staff, we basically took all of our programs and sorted those into categories that better define everything we do. That was the first big step. And what we came up with was this chart here. So we've got youth sports, youth programs, adult sports and programs, events, facilities, and special communities. So those are the categories. Within those categories, we have levels. Think of that filter where I talked about level of instruction or intensity of the program. We went further and defined those as, youth sports, you've got instructional, like T-ball, or even the My First sports offering that we do, and then work your way up through advanced, which would be more of a highly competitive situation or a one-on-one tennis program or golf program, something along those lines. And again, you'll see that throughout all of the categories from that instructional to more advanced. I'm going to jump over to the events. So if it's an internal program, maybe it's an external event, or if it's free. And then same thing applies a little bit to facilities. We've got public facilities, we've got outdoor, indoor, restricted access, those programs that we have to supervise. Again, when you start thinking about cost recovery, that's where that kind of kicks in. Is it a drop-in program? Is it an indoor or an outdoor drop-in program, i.e. walking on a trail, using a shelter, using an outdoor basketball court opposed to an indoor basketball court? All of those things were taken into account. And then, of course, open spaces. It's just a big park area where people can come and play with a Frisbee or let their dog chase a ball, that kind of thing. And then, of course, special communities. And the levels there we identified were supervised, drop-in, and then more intense trips where we're taking a fewer number of participants on a specialized trip. So that's what we came up with categories, and then those levels within categories to start that basis for the pyramid model. And then we took things that were like things and placed those in groups on the pyramid using the community benefit philosophy, and then putting those through those primary filters that we discussed. And this is our basis for the pyramid. Tier 1 is the broadest community benefit. That's those programs that benefit the largest number of our population. Tier 5, obviously, the highly individual benefit, and we talked a little bit about that already with the Youth Advance. They're higher level intensity of instruction. They're more competitive in nature when you're talking about sports. They most likely will be an indoor where we've got some overhead that we have to try to cover, a for-profit event, for example. And then in the middle, those things that are, starting from the Tier 1 through Tier 5, as they generally get more individual benefit as they go up. So we've got community/individual with youth instructional, an MPRD community special event, youth developmental, adult instructional, moving all the way through to youth intermediate, adult intermediate, private club, and sport rental. Any questions on any of that so far? Make sense? Okay. And then we determined a cost recovery for each level on the pyramid. And I talk a little bit about this as we move through, but we'll get to what is cost, what are we looking at when we talk about cost, what are we trying to recover. But this is the idea we came up with, the cost recovery, including the levels. So at the bottom, our base, our foundation, those programs that we know we're going to offer that are going to benefit the largest number of people in the community, 0 to 25% of direct costs. So we've got that outdoor drop-in. Again, think parks and playgrounds and trails and things like that. Nonprofit outdoor event, move up to the next category, the youth instructional, MPRD community special event, that 26 to 50%, Next category, 51 to 100, 101 to 125%, getting again to the more individual benefit. And then the highly individual would be 126% plus cost recovery, which is that youth advanced adult, and as I mentioned, the for-profit event and program. Make sense? Okay. So what are we trying to recover? So we've identified direct costs are any of those personnel expenses that relate directly to the program, for officials, supervisors, instructors, all of the supplies, obviously, any equipment that goes into running that program, trip expenses, facility rentals, those are all the direct costs. I may have a side here just a little bit. So since I've been here in the 6 months, I've discovered that currently our seasonal wages are included in the resolution that covers salaries. I think that the commission approves. And I want a little bit of discussion about, I would like to somehow make a change to that where we can kind of control that, which helps us look at all aspects of cost recovery, because cost recovery is just obviously not just about making money. It's about tweaking the numbers to meet those levels that are established for each program. And one of those, obviously, the biggest expense typically is personnel costs. So we need to be able to adjust those typically up. Obviously, we don't lower those, but we could lower them if we, for example, wanted to reduce the number of sessions or a number of games, things like that. But obviously, we can adjust awards, T-shirts, find an alternative to that. But the bottom line is we want to be able to control that. So I may at some point, I'm not sure what next steps are, but I know it was talked about in the department head meeting.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Chris. I can just pick up on that a little bit. So in the salary ordinance that you pass at the end of it, it's some broader authority, but it established some ranges of salaries primarily for regular part-time and regular seasonal part-time employees. And then it also has a sentence, and they kind of contradict each other, because historically, before we started listing those, it allowed the city manager to establish those seasonal wage rates based on market conditions and stuff like that. So we may be bringing that back to you for some clarification, to give us some of that flexibility that Chris is talking about, instead of establishing most of the time a year in advance of what those seasonal brackets might be, depending on what the competition is, availability of seasonal workers and that sort of thing. And that's kind of what we've done in the past to give the manager the flexibility to establish some broader ranges, or especially for hard-to-employ type positions like guards, and that's usually been our most competitive. But more recently, there's been things like officials, and there's a lack of officials for refereeing and the different sports that have. So that's where some of that could come into play, and it really is market conditions for those seasonal workers, which doesn't necessarily compete specifically with our regular full-time employees. So probably more to come on that if you're interested in us being able to. We'd like to have that conversation with you.
So moving over to the indirect costs, I know there are communities and organizations that include indirect costs in their cost recovery. We've opted, again for now, something we could look at in the future, to do the direct costs, so that when I'm talking about on the pyramid model, the 0 to 25%, 26% up, over 100%, that's talking about direct costs. We've chosen to address indirect costs by attaching an administrative fee of 10% over and above that cost recovery for direct costs. So when we talk about cost recovery, it's that percentage depending on what tier plus 10%. So that's how we've looked at the indirect costs for now. Just wanted to clarify that. So what I want, basically looking for tonight, is just your feedback on the principles of the cost recovery model. how we plan on using it. And then as part of our discussion on fees, which I think will follow, we'll talk a little bit about the non-peak and then a nonprofit rate. We can get to that in a second. But any questions on the cost recovery model or?
No, it seems like a semi-brilliant plan, and so I suppose it's always going to be the details when you start filling in the blanks, and then the certain people will be affected and they'll get excited, and other people will be glad, I suppose, and so, yeah, I think, obviously that throwing a 10% for the indirect costs is probably low, but you got to start somewhere and come up with something, and so we'll see if that, just because I doubt if all the indirect cost is only 10%, but.
Right.
But so, John?
Yeah, I mean, you came up with your categories, 1 to 5 or whatever. And as you see, we have nobody here to see any of this. I want to know, well, which one of those items is going to cause this room to fill up once we announce what the rates are? I mean, that would be my question. Okay, who's going to get the biggest chunk increase in this that we're going to hear about?
Yeah, that's a good question. Moving forward, obviously, our summer activity guide will come out in the next probably 2 weeks. So we're waiting, obviously, for approval of this or not to move forward with that because we price that accordingly. So yeah, I suppose after that hits the streets, we may get some, but I really don't. Because the other thing that I've heard since I've been back was, the discussion about, running programs, and are we going to do programs? Are we, privatizing those? And I've said this multiple times in different meetings that, my intention is to run programs, to offer programs, and this policy allows us to do that. I didn't mention what we're currently operating under, the 110% for youth and 120% cost recovery for adults. This approach allows us to offer more programs, a wider variety of programs, and the intent is kind of that bell curve. We want, the middle, we want to average. My goal for all of the Parks and Rec department is 65%. And again, so to do that, we've got to average, that number. So long term, that it may take a while to get there, but so we'll have a few, items at the bottom and few items at the top, but offer several programs in that middle area is the goal. And this allows us to do that. So I would hope the community, because that's one of the things I heard, obviously I listened to one of the meetings before I started and since heard some discussion about making sure we're offering programs. We're taking softball back over. We offered flag football. We've already offered several new programs for the spring and summer. So my goal is to offer programs.
Chris, I know you've had some discussions with the Park and Rec Advisory Board relative to these issues and your cost recovery model. You want to talk about, I think they passed a motion in support of the.
Yeah, their only recommendation was what I've got on here as far as the nonprofit we'll get to with fees. But yeah, in general, they were supportive of the model and we're fine with what we were trying to do. I think, is that something else missed? Yeah.
So I don't know if there was more to the presentation or not. Was there more to the presentation?
Not on the cost recovery side of things. I want to go into a little bit of discussion about the fees because they are reflective of the policy.
Yeah, I think that's what I was interested in.
Okay.
I think what you laid out is really good, and that's something we need to work on, is the fundamentals of, and also what exactly does cost recovery mean? Because cost recovery is defined differently. I'm not sure you're anticipating 100% of everything to be covered by all of this.
No.
There's always a certain percentage that's done with the city involvement too. But it would be good to see that trend, like a 4 or 5 year trend, as we start this, but also where we were, and if it's working or not. Because I think it's expected that some of these fees are going to look differently. And we really won't know until it's implemented. I think that's when we will actually know. But I
Right.
think the reasoning behind all of this is solid. So.
Yeah.
Didn't you say your overall goal is 65%?
For the department, yeah, that's been my past history is that's a pretty healthy, again, that includes the park side. If we're doing just recreation, it would be slightly higher than that.
Okay, but just total, about
Yep,
65%.
total, that's the goal.
So the rest of the budget is gonna be absorbed by the general fund then?
Or, yes,
That sounds fine.
yep.
The, I'm surprised somebody didn't ask about scholarships and stuff. What, do we normally try to have a small pile of money for that? Or is that something we should try to see if the GMCF has $20,000 they would set aside for kid scholarships for things? Because someone's surely gonna think they now can no longer afford put their kid in a program.
Yeah, and I will let you know that I've had meetings with members of the chamber, and I know Ron and Jason have had meetings with folks representing the chamber. I know the foundation is interested in helping, and there's been discussions. I had one today about helping us do just that. Also had some discussions about sponsorships and trying to help us raise sponsorship dollars, which I know has been another topic since I've been here. So yeah, that's in the works, that's in motion.
So how do the sponsorships fit into the cost recovery model of things? Is that totally a separate discussion for?
No, not really. That's a good lead-in. So for example, our special events. So in the past, we didn't focus much on cost recovery. So right now, we are not doing many special events, especially ones that cost a lot of money. In the future, though, if you look, that's why I moved back to this slide. If you look at the level 2, we've got MPRD special event, community and special events. So we will look to sponsorships, grants, things to try to cover up to 50% of those events, where in the past we didn't necessarily focus on that. So we will not offer, I mean, that's the other side, that's the downside kind of, is if we don't get to that at least 26%, we may not offer that special event. So yeah, that's how it plays in.
I would just say, in general, the scholarship program has had either general fund support for scholarships, or we've actually, the past several years, we've had the Community Foundation that has identified sources of funds and given a particular amount, I want to say 10 to 15,000. It kind of varied over time for, certainly some went to swimming, some went to or aquatics, some went to just regular, most of it went to youth programs, almost completely, and I've had discussions with the Community Foundation. It's a high priority for them. I'm also had discussions with the chamber, and they're interested in not just focusing on individual participant need, but also just looking at broader issues of creating some kind of formal foundation level of funding that could underwrite some programs specifically. So those discussions are happening, and certainly think there's an opportunity for that. There's also been discussion at the Park and Rec Advisory Board of having its own foundation. So those are some other aspects too, as to where things might have an options of going.
All right, phase 2.
Okay.
Say something. Sorry, I
Linda?
chimed in before Linda was pushing for her mic before I started to speak, so.
What are some examples of the free or the special events that you have, that have been free in the past that might not be in the future? Will there be any, I guess is the question. Are there some foundational, like in the past, the Parks and Rec has worked with, at Easter for an I don't know what you
So it's
called
an
it.
egg hunt.
Community event.
Community event, I can think of several that have been just like fun days in the park.
Yeah.
That we've relied heavily on volunteer groups to help provide the labor for those, and just park-type games, you know, that could be horseshoes and kids rotate to different areas, bouncy houses, you know, just kind of a play day atmosphere. And then you I know there's been churches that have volunteered to help staff some of those stations as kids rotated through them. And those are the kind of events, because you got rentals for all of the temporary inflatables that you're building. And so if you can't, I think we have had good success of recruiting volunteers to help staff those, but that may not always be the case. So those would be some of those events that you'd try to look for some underwriters, and maybe somebody, Lions Club has traditionally hosted the egg hunt, so there's some traditions there, and whether you expand those into other components.
just
The
wonder-
Optimist Club has certainly stepped up and sponsored T-ball and other types of activities, so those relationships exist.
We aren't aware of what those activities are
Sure.
typically. And when we've asked for what are the contributions that, you know, that have been made to the city in different ways, or Parks and Rec, we just never get that information. So I don't know what the Community Foundation contributed. I know they helped with Arts in the Park one summer. I don't know if they help every summer, if it's in total, if it is $10,000 or what. We don't know. So my question is, do we, and I also know that it seems to me that there are fewer volunteers coming forward in different, across the board. It's just, since COVID, there just has not been the kind of, just volunteer, I guess is the word. So I'm not interested in us having these wonderful facilities that we have. The citizens have voted for the pools, they've voted for Seco, we're gonna do something coming up on Seco Park in the next couple of years. And so I wanna be sure that we don't just have the facilities. And I know that there are some athletic clubs that want to use our facilities. So I want to be just careful that we don't just become a club community with these wonderful facilities. So there's some balance, and I just want to be sure that we're not pushing people out that have been participating in the past, or maybe our programs have dwindled. Maybe we don't have the kind of interest that we once did.
Well, I'll address that real quick, because
Please.
keep in mind that we're just talking about direct costs. So the first two tiers address most of special events that are held in the city of Manhattan. The difference is, if it's an outdoor, like Ron was alluding to, the Easter egg hunt, that's typically volunteer, or we don't usually provide a supervisor. We don't have to put out barricades or trash cans or anything on the park side, so there's no cost there. It's really, they're using an open space.
Right.
So that one is gonna meet the 0 to 25%
So are they
anyway.
paying to have?
They don't typically have to
I
rent.
know they haven't. I don't think they have. I
No,
think
no, there's no
we've
need,
partnered.
right?
So I know the Juneteenth program, for example, doesn't have a lot of money to bring to the table. And so I know the city has been a partner in that, like they have with the egg hunt. And so I just wondered I don't know all the events, is what I started out. I started this by saying, I don't know all the events that that the city supports.
Well, next week, there's an item on the agenda, I'm speaking out of turn a little bit, that talking about Arts in the Park and the Juneteenth concert for Friday night of the Juneteenth celebration. That's going to be addressed next week on an item that we're bringing to the commission.
So you've been successful getting, Ron will tell us in the update probably. The RFPs have been successful for Arts in the Park. we're interested always in those programs. They're very visible.
So just I'll make one more point about, so if you look at the second tier, so why we split that is if it's an MPRD community or special event, community-wide event, special event, all we're trying to do is get 50%. And so all that means is if we have to have people on staff, if it's a large enough event where we need some of the things that I mentioned, additional trash cans, additional supervision, more personnel involved, we're still shooting for, 50% at a max. And, if we've got a couple of supervisors, they're at roughly $12 an hour. So we're not really talking about a lot of money anyway. We're just at least now have a target where in the past we didn't. We just, ran the program and let the chips fall where they may, so to speak. But hopefully we're just applying a little bit more of logic and a set procedure in place. We're really typically not talking a lot, for most of the smaller events.
All right.
Yeah.
You got something else,
Okay.
Glenn?
Let me get.
Yeah, just that third tier there, John asked earlier what would upset people, and, we got indoor drop-in, which is sort of like the pools to me. People want to drop into those rec centers, even the gym here, and play various things, and if we're gonna try to recover 51% of drop-ins, that could become an issue.
Well, except if you think about our open times, we typically have staff there anyway. We're not having to bring anyone in. And I will tell you that even though in the current fees, we haven't asked for any type, because I don't want to go there, any type of admission or fee for the gyms. That just allows us at some point, if we ever want to do that, we have that in place. But again, keeping in mind, if we're just talking about direct expenses, we don't really have a lot of direct expenses because the gyms are open, the rec centers are open, we have staff there. Part of what I've done since I've come on board, I've moved most of our rec staff to the rec center, so we have even more staff there. So, yeah, that's just keeping, if we do want to, offer more, yeah, that's just a cover your bases kind of a thing. Right now, we're not proposing any type of admission fee or daily fee or anything like that.
Okay, I appreciate that, because that's important. Some folks will get upset, but I get it, because you're not doing anything extra for a drop-in.
Right.
But if you decided to, like, open the building on a holiday when it was normally closed, then
Right.
there would be additional cost.
Correct.
And there would have to be a charge for that.
Right, and we would typically do that if we were running a program and we're going to charge fees anyway, so.
Okay, got it.
Chris, you might just expand a little bit. I know you and your staff are looking at next school year, and instead of I think you're planning to continue the partnership with Boys and Girls Club, but you're planning to expand that.
That's the hope.
So you could still have some drop-in, but you might have some structured programming during that time that people still have to sign up for, and there could be a fee for that, but there may be also some drop-in time. And folks that used to come and use that facility during some of those times, there'll be more structure
Yeah.
going on. So that would be an item where you may have programs that people do pay for after school that are in the facility at the same time as there's some potential drop-in time as well.
But that helps us kind of get a handle on that, and obviously I wasn't here in previous years, but I've heard comments, and I know it wasn't the best situation, so that, again, one of the other reasons I consolidated my staff there, and we'll hopefully be able to help cover things in the future, those types of
I'd be
activities.
interested in, if the situation in the rec centers has improved after school, with your staff being on site, is the climate there, are the students more in control?
Well, keep in mind that, as Ron alluded to, we work with the Boys and Girls Club, so the facility is closed to the public during those after-school hours at the present time, and the Boys and Girls Club basically has the run of the two gyms on our side. Obviously, the schools are still using them for practices. But so yes, to answer your question, but mainly because it's closed. But what Ron's talking about is in the future, I would like to have an opportunity where we would have some structured activities for middle school students. We would still be able to allow the drop-in, the walkers, the people want to come in and use that facility, and then still provide that structure to keep us from getting in a situation where we were before.
Wasn't the Boys and Girls Club going to be more short-term?
Well, I think they've always had, from my understanding, always had a presence in the schools.
They've run a program in the school space, not even the school side of our gyms. They've always had school space. When we extended it to be in the rec centers, it just allowed them to accommodate more individuals in that program. So, one of the things that I know we've looked at and we've offered in the past, but in a very limited way, mainly at the high schools, an intramural program. And we've typically only, I think, done it with basketball, but you could do an intramural program with all of those sports, and we haven't had the facilities to do it in the past. So that's a program that if you're going to be in the intramural program, whether it's intramural volleyball, basketball, soccer, whatever the case may be, you sign up for that just like you would another program. It just happens to be after school.
All right,
Anything else on that?
on
Okay.
to the next thing.
All right, let's, yeah, Chrome, there we go. Right there. Let's see, I know you did some of this. Okay, so I know this has been brought to you probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years. Is that accurate? I know this was the part why it was going to lead, so I'm trying to take the lead from him. But I know we tweaked it a little bit in October of last year. As part of the cost recovery process, we took a look at fees again. Probably the biggest change that affects the rec side fees is what I alluded to on the last slide of the presentation, the idea of adopting a peak time, non-peak time. In the past, if you remember, we had commercial, non-commercial. And in practice, we hardly ever charged the commercial rate. One, it was hard to identify who was a commercial customer and who was a non-commercial. And as we all do, we all like a less expensive fee or a less expensive price. So there was a lot of charging of the non-commercial fee and not very little charging of the non-commercial, or the commercial fee, excuse me. So to adopt more of the principles of peak, non-peak, as I have already alluded to, during work time, when my staff is present, that's the peak time, identified at more that 8 to 5. When I have staff present in any of our facilities, it costs us less, so we gave a discount to that time. We're trying to provide incentive. The peak time, obviously, everybody wants to come in after 5 and on weekends, and so and we have programs, so we have to prioritize in some way. And again, talking about the market, we've got the most gyms outside of the school district in town, so they're a hot commodity, as it were. So the idea is that basically what I did is took the commercial rate, without going line by line with a lot of these fees. What I did is took the commercial rate, moved that to the peak time. Make sure I'm doing that right, and then discounted the non-peak time. Does that make sense? So we're trying to incentivize people to use that 8 to 5 when we have staff present. And again, this is applicable across all of our indoor facilities mainly. And then charge, that little bit higher, have that higher rate established for the peak time. Does that make sense?
I think you misspoke earlier. You meant to say when everybody's there, that should be the cheaper time.
Right. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
and so when you have to have people after hours,
Correct.
price is going up.
Right.
Got it.
Exactly. Sorry. Yes. So I will go through some of them. If there's any questions specifically, I'll point out.
Can you see about blowing that up? Move your cursor to
Oh,
the
yeah.
bottom area. Down to bottom, there, click on
There
it.
it is, there it is.
There you go. Okay,
A little more?
a little more. There we go.
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
It helps out on these things.
Gotcha, okay. So yeah, so as I said, I took the non-commercial out, adopted more of a non-peak, peak time approach. Some of these rates have been changed. I did highlight some of the ones that we've adjusted. Oops. The depot's probably the biggest. And it was more than just peak time, non-peak time. We better defined a day, so we took, yeah, so the rates are now for the non-peak time, $50 an hour, and non-peak $75. We better establish what a day was. In the past, you could basically rent the facility for 12 hours or more, and it didn't really give us a lot of time to come in and clean up. Internally, the recreation department now schedules the depot. Used to be through the Discovery Center. Now we do it. And another change that came along with that is we are using our building maintenance to keep the custodial duties. We used to contract that out. So we've adjusted that weekend rate, that peak time, a little bit, and better defined what a day is. So basically, the non-peak time is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. When we have janitorial staff on duty, we don't necessarily have anybody at the depot, but we have people available should something come up. You know, if there's a mess, something that needs to be cleaned up, we can send staff over. That peak time is now established more of 8 hours on Saturday and Sunday. If they want it, anybody wants it over and above that, then they would pay the hourly rate, which is at $75 an hour. And again, because we will have to come in, somebody will have to come in weekend, clean up, make sure it's ready for the next reservation.
These rates are 50% recovery, is that what you're saying, you're using the 50% recovery on the
No, it really doesn't go to that degree.
full cost?
I'm
of
sorry?
seems to me to be more the full cost of your,
Well, yeah, we don't really apply the cost recovery levels to the rental rates. It's just the idea that it costs us more in a peak time to operate these facilities. That's really the extent of the applicability of the cost recovery.
So the cost recovery, think about the cost recovery model, really only applies to recreation programs.
Right.
Not our park facilities or anything like that.
but we're talking facilities here.
Yes.
Right.
So
I mean,
So, and the distinguishing
What it
is
costs to
between
run
commercial or non-commercial.
this city hall tonight with all of the staff and,
Right, but here I think you have coverage in the evening, right? Have some
Yeah,
coverage?
we've got custodial.
custodial come in after we leave.
and this is more of charge what the market will bear kind of a deal.
That's a big part of it, yes, yes. Knowing that it costs us more in a peak time opposed to the non-peak time. Let me think, there was a couple other, we cleaned up some things, and again, this is, again, not necessarily related directly to the cost recovery, but for the rec centers, we had hours listed. So basically the rental time was 8 to 8 on weekends. Tournament promoters don't stick to those hours. For example, we've got MAYB volleyball this weekend. They want to have access at 7. Their last game is around 5, but if it's a full tournament, they could play to 9 or 10 at night on a Saturday. So we adjusted, and I'm in the wrong place, sorry, I want to be here. So we adjusted that, we took out the restrictive times, 8 to 8. We've bumped the fee a little bit for the overall day rate, so it does reflect more of the cost recovery. and then took it out across the board. So it's no longer in any of the full court or 2 courts or, single day courts, that kind of thing, that we took all the hour out. That's the biggest change there. I just wanted to point that out. Another one that is directly related to cost recovery, we used to charge only, we have never had anybody do it, but the turf setup was $100. Nowhere near cost recovery, and that was only setup. That didn't cover tearing down. So that takes 4 people pretty much all day to set it up. Obviously, it takes less to tear it down, but we weren't even close to covering that fee. So we did adjust that a little bit.
Relative to that, we're having some discussions with the school district of, because there has been demand for it, and at the same time, there's demand for a lot of court space. So that setup and takedown is very labor intensive. And so we're looking at trying to identify some facilities where we might be able to set up a court or half court for full turf for a period of time, and then have other alternate court spaces open in other facilities as an alternative while that is set up on that court or those courts for, a month maybe.
Just leave it, yeah.
Right, and then program it.
Yep.
We could have, futsal, short-sided soccer, we could do tumbling, cheerleading, on that turf space. We can do t-ball if we want to do little kids. So, yeah, there's a plethora of activities that we can do by having that turf space. And again, talk about market, there's not a lot of other facilities out there with turf space, and I would really like to cash in on that, figuratively and literally. So, and we also, Ron mentioned other facilities. We are in discussions with the school district and using some of their spaces, like we used to do rec centers. We used to have 12, 13 gyms in use, and now we're at 9 or so. So we want to get back to that level, and that would allow us to program space at the schools and then have maybe a court set up at a rec center. Anything else on that? I'll transition to the other thing I wanted to talk about. Ron mentioned and.
I'd like to go
sorry.
back
Sorry.
a
Yeah.
page to the first page where it says under facility, and it's the park shelters, the open-air park shelters. So you'd begin charging for them if you registered ahead of time?
We currently charge for shelters.
You do?
Yes. There's always, and they vary in price depending on the amenities they have.
Yeah.
Electricity, you can plug in items, there's always cleaning, but, if they're free, if they're not reserved, if you're reserving them, you pay a fee. And then we go over and identify who's got it reserved at what time, so if somebody's there, they know, they show up, this group has it reserved for 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever the case may be.
So, but these are the only ones you charge for then?
Yes, that's correct.
Where is park green space?
That's just general, if you want to rent a section of the park
Section of a
for a
park.
special activity.
Rose garden or something?
The Rose Garden
That
has a
could be
fee.
an open space for a
It's there.
futsal tournament,
Yeah.
whatever the
Okay.
case.
But general park space?
Yes.
And that way you can't get run off from it by somebody because you
Right.
paid to have it.
Can
There's
have a
nobody there.
ultimate frisbee event or something like that.
Go poach. Okay, I just wanted to know where this park green space is. And Triangle Park for I think the only event that I'm aware of is the Christmas.
Now, there's lots of rentals for Triangle Park of groups that want to have a staged activity there and reserve it specifically for their group for some activity. The plaza, there's a small overhang there, and
And
then
it
that will likely change. when,
won't be
there's
constituted like
proposals
it is
for
now.
future improvements at Triangle Park, and that
Yeah.
will, depending on the nature of those improvements, our 12th Street Plaza will probably get added to this list, those sorts of things.
So when people are having protests at Triangle Park, I know they have to have a permit, gathering permit. Do they have to pay a fee for Triangle Park?
Not necessarily. It kind of depends if they're wanting to have a picnic there or something else besides their
If they're just
their
standing
event.
there, there's no
Right.
charge,
Correct.
if you want to try to organize
They
something.
just
with-
need to register it.
Yeah, okay. All right.
The other item that came up in both the Parks and Rec Advisory Board and the Douglas Community Center Advisory Board was the potential establishment of a nonprofit fee for use of meeting rooms, meeting spaces. So after hearing that, we went to legal, we discussed that as an option. The first challenge is defining what is nonprofit. You know, people throw around 501c3. Well, there's several 501c designations that goes on and on. So we felt that we could get into a little bit of what we were struggling with, commercial, non-commercial. How do we prove that? And what's a nonprofit organization? So that may be a little bit difficult to do. So it's not saying we can't do it. However, in our last advisory board, they did discuss maybe we just make those non-peak time rates really affordable in the 3 rec centers, community room, multi-purpose room, and just, you know, really incentivize the heck out of organizations in the community to use those facilities. And as I said earlier, maybe that's our loss leader. Maybe we try to cross-sell them as they're in our building. We hook them up with the pickleball league. So there's been some discussion of that's kind of our 2 options, is to continue work with legal to come up with a definition that's workable, that's something that staff, you know, who happens to take that phone call, can work through easily. We don't want to go to legal every time we have to define that, or just make them low enough that that people can afford them, organization, book clubs, whatever. So I guess we want a little bit of discussion about that. And kind of so some of those.
Just a second. So on on the copy I have, there's blue ones and they're crossed off. For example, Douglas Community Rec Center, let's say.
The community room?
Rec Center and Annex, right there.
Okay.
So it says DCRC Gymnasium. On my copy, I have $35 and it's crossed out and it says 30. So we are reducing it? Is that what you're saying?
Are you talking about court space or the meeting rooms?
The gymnasium. It says DCRC Gymnasium. And on there you have $30 an hour. But on my copy, I have 35 that's crossed out and then it says 30. Do you know what I'm looking at?
Right.
Right under Douglas Community Center.
Yeah, I think we're at the same, looking at the same thing. Hers has just got the X out.
Has an X, so
Well,
you had the show changes
There are 2
version?
copies
Yeah,
in
so
our
did it go
packet.
down from 35 to 30?
Yes.
One shows the edits and one doesn't.
Yeah, I think included in your packet was the one showing the edits, showing the what we made different, and then there's a clean copy. I'm looking at the clean
These are the
copy.
new
Yeah, this is the clean.
edited ones. That's
So
to
we
show you
went
what they were
decreased, is
before.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, we adjusted them to be in line with Eisenhower and Anthony.
Okay, that's
So
all
we
I
were-
wanted to
yeah.
clarify, that
For the
I
regular-
wasn't reading it wrong
Right.
incorrectly.
No, that's accurate.
Okay, because typically they go up, and this one was showing the opposite.
Yeah.
So you just wanted to align it with the other rec centers, is what
Correct.
you're saying. Okay, thank you.
But, so what we want to look at now is the community room, potentially the King Room, the Douglas Tubman Room, any of the rooms that traditionally have been utilized for meeting space. And typically that meeting space is in non-peak time during the workday for the most part. And right now we're at $30 pretty much across the board for the multipurpose rooms and the meeting space at the Douglas Community Center and Activity Center.
What are the hours down there at the Douglas Center?
Oh, that's a good question.
Are they less than the AMC and EMC?
Correct,
Yes.
they are. But I do know they have expanded their hours starting this Sunday. They're going from noon to 6, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but they're not in my purview, so I have just a tangential relationship with them. But yeah, I know they are expanding them, but in the past they haven't been the same.
Right now it's 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and closed Sunday. So they might be expanding some of those, but
Yeah, they're
that's
expanding
generally
their
what it is
Sunday.
now.
Okay.
And we're open 7 in the morning at the ERC and ARC.
Are these ball field prices per hour rates about the same it would cost for a group to go to another community? Are our rates competitive?
Yeah, that's how we established most of our rental rates. We looked at the market, looked at like-sized communities. We didn't, as part of this, we did not adjust any of the outdoor field space.
Thanks. I do support making the community rooms available as nominally as you can. I think that these are community centers, and we ought to have a semblance of a community, inviting the community to be there, whatever that has to be, if there's a nominal fee or not.
It's kind of interesting because the library, you can rent rooms there for free to the auditorium and a lot of their other rooms.
From understand, that's the only place? Maybe does the county have a place too?
No, they require a fee
Okay,
for Potter Hall primarily as their larger meeting space. You know, I don't know exactly the library, but the library's open during the times their meeting room's available. So it's kind of like our non-peak time where we have more staff there, we have custodial staff there, as opposed to if it's after hours. That's a higher operational cost for us to accommodate.
Yeah, I just know the library's been a great resource
Yeah.
for nonprofits and everything else, and community events or for, political, forums and debates, and yeah, it's a great resource because it doesn't cost you anything to use.
We are having some discussion about looking at our headquarters fire station. That meeting room was available to the public for utilization. You can only do it so many times a year free, but again, we've got staff there. Since COVID, we turned it into an emergency operations center, as you might recall. So we haven't gone back to that, but we're having some of those discussions.
What is the gym here at City Hall? Is it listed on your,
yeah, it's the Peace Memorial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yep.
$40 an hour,
yeah, I'm having trouble.
non-peak.
Yeah, and it's a little bit bigger court. Yeah, there it is, sorry. So, yeah, it's a little bit bigger court, and it's more exclusive. When you rent it, you get basically the whole use of the whole room.
Sure. Do you program activities in there? Or is it?
Not as much as we used to, but
Is it
yeah.
totally drop-in for,
No drop-in.
no drop-in?
No, it's all reservation right now. We don't have any drop-in. We have a large number of reservations, more than I thought, as Ron alluded to, with my pursuit of trying to put some of our turf down. I actually looked at Peace Memorial, but I was surprised by a number of rentals we do have. A lot of sports teams practicing, a few concerts, dance recitals.
Yeah, just a story. A friend, out-of-town friend from Marysville invited me to come see their nephew or grandson play in a eighth grade tournament that Lucky was hosting because of their league of Catholic schools, and it was full of people from Washington County and Hanover, as well as Lucky. The girls were playing, and I mean, it was packed completely. And they held, I think, probably 4 different days. They had actually more than that, because they had quarterfinals, semifinals, and then the finals there. So that was use, and there's just different groups that have wanted to use it. I know ran into folks that are interested in doing using the stage and doing some concert or theatrical production there as well. So I think those rates are the same regardless of whether it's the gym or the stage, but I'm not 100% sure of that, because there's probably some more technicians we need if they're using lights and sound and that kind of stuff.
Not much sound.
No, there's great sound. Well, that's part of the renovation, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's
Been upgraded.
great sound in that place.
Is there direction on the room fees or approach there, I guess?
You comfortable with the non-peak, peak concept as opposed to different group rates or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm good. I think that's simplistic enough, and as John pointed out, the library's got it free, and, you may end up using the fire station for that. And the difference there is, though, the library makes you clean it up. They don't provide custodians. I mean, you've got to do your own setup and tear down, so it's a little bit of a different monster, but I think this is fine.
I think if commercial and nonprofit breakdown wasn't or individual versus commercial wasn't working, it would be important to shift to another model, and peak and non-peak are as good as any. Let's try it and see how it works.
Would it be of interest to maybe, we use the library for a different meeting with a different organization, to have a monthly meeting there, because it's free and within their hours. Would it be a good community to have the community, if they rent it, if there's somebody interested in renting it every month, to give maybe the third or fourth month free or something like that, so people would be open to using it more frequently, which is kind of what we want them to do?
Yeah, I suppose we could have a exclusion if the department head, I think it's already in there that the department head could waive fees.
Yeah, the trouble we run into is just availability. And so if this group, we typically haven't done long-term reservations. I think that's kind of the reasons we had the use at the fire station. You were limited to how many uses you got because the other groups in the public wanted to do it. And so I think it's one of those things, if we're having tons of non-use times, and those times have been available, that's something we could certainly look at.
Because part of that is we still want to have the ability to program it if something comes up that we would like to, that, I don't know, comes around that is popular and we have a space, we would like to program first. So if we'd have a long-term reservation, it would be harder, we'd lose some flexibility.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just thought I'd throw it out there, because there's so many organizations in our community that are always trying to find that free space.
Sure.
To have a meeting, or an affordable space to have a meeting. So I was
Right.
just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Does anybody have a recommendation on a amount, or we just want us to leave that up to us? Or
There you go.
Okay, all right, good enough.
We don't want our fingerprints on that.
We'll hear about it.
Plausible
you've been-
deniability on.
You've been sitting back there patiently. Anything you want to point out at the zoo? Any changes that the fee schedule? I know we're looking at having this on the commission agenda
Pay down.
next week, so they can take them into consideration for this summer.
There have been a few fee adjustments, mostly to rentals and things, and that's basically a reflection of the cost of our labor. Our staff costs have gone up quite a bit in the last year, so we tried to incorporate that into our rental fees, and that's really about it. Our programming fees are pretty much the same as our gate admission is the same.
How's the new oversized gazebo meeting or festivity
It's
facility?
working really well.
Good.
When the weather's nice, we have rented the heck out of it. So yeah, it's a great space. To clarify though, we are still operating for our programs under the 110, 120% cost recovery model that we had before. We're not following Recreation's model at this point.
Yeah, I think that's probably, so the pyramid, the cost recovery concept is really specific to a program, recreation programs. It's not department wide. It doesn't really relate to facilities necessarily. And, to Chris's credit of the goal of getting to overall 65%. If you think about it, our pools, that parkside support is huge compared to your typical program. You could argue a lot of your turf fields have more mowing. Our synthetics don't, but we have to do maintenance on synthetic fields too. So those park operations are heavier. So that indirect, and they're in the indirect costs, they're not in the direct costs. So those are some of those things that I think we have to look at and potentially adjust and get a better feel for what is that cost. And then, of course, the full-time recreation department and what are, some programs require more support from admin, you know, if you've been around the K-State, there was always the Anderson Hall fee or in a corporation, there's the corporate overhead fee for admin. You know, there's a cost to all that, you know, making sure people handling the money and paying the folks that are working there. So those are just things that we can better identify as we have more experience and get some better software in our ancient operating system.
Do you offer, do that like the Friends of the Zoo that make such wonderful contributions and fund your programs? Do they get some special rates sometimes?
They
for
do,
events?
depending on, so typically for our,
It makes sense.
right, they get 10% discount on most of our programming. They get 10% discount on concessions and gift shop items as well. But yes, there's a discount for
Now,
being
those are
friends.
individuals,
Yeah.
but I meant if they wanted to host something at the zoo, they could get a special rate.
Get
for
a
those.
special fee. I don't believe we do that.
You don't do that?
No.
Okay, all right.
No,
Full price.
full price.
No discounts.
From one hand to the other and then back again. So,
Yes, sir.
all
Are
right.
there any other questions for me? Thank you.
All right, thanks for coming, Scott.
Susan Adams, director of the Flint Hills Discovery Center, is on Teams. I don't know if, Susan, do you have any comment on your facility?
Thanks for checking in, Jared. It would be very similar to what Scott said. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay. We raised our fees, rental fees, let me clarify, to be competitive with what's happening in our community, but then also where Scott went with the cost of salaries and increase of hiring and paying fairly to employees. That has also been a component as well. With coming out of COVID, we do need to have a higher presence at our rentals, and so that's going to, you know, change what we have spent in the previous 2 or 3 years.
any questions for Susan? Thanks for hanging on, thank you.
You bet.
All right.
Okay, I think that's pretty much all I was going to talk about on fees. Anything else? I can't remember. Oh, you have the policy, the actual pricing and revenue policy. Are there any questions on any of that? There's a lot of definitions in there.
I have a basic question about the 50% recovery policy. Where did that come from? It wasn't commission generated.
Your pyramid approach.
The 50% cost recovery.
For which I'm on the overall.
Yeah, overall.
No, it was 65 was his goal.
That's what he said tonight, but the materials we had talked about I thought it was a 50%.
Historically, I think you've been
Cost
around
recovery.
50%. If you,
I wouldn't, there was no policy. That's
Yeah,
just
it's
been
not-
our actual
Okay,
cost recovery.
that's what you've.
has been.
yeah, I just use it as a performance measure, performance indicator in previous stints of my position. So that's just an internal thing. Obviously, the pyramid itself is what we shoot for on a program by program basis. So my rec supervisors, to apply this moving forward, we have a program budget, and you know, if it's t-ball or youth baseball or adult basketball, they'll fill out that sheet, submit it to me. I'll make sure that it meets the requirements or guidelines, and then we can tweak it, meaning those things we already talked about, all the costs, including potentially raising, and that's what that came up as adult basketball. We were out of whack with adult basketball. I'm a 30-plus year CASA registered official, and I know what basketball officials get now for high school and middle school games, and they've substantially come up. In fact, I have been out for 2 years. I'm still registered, but I haven't worked, and I'm thinking about getting back in because it's getting pretty attractive. So they really are up. So that's what caused that. So we look at that program, then I approve it and say, yep, move forward. And then after the program is run, then we'll go back and look and see if we hit our numbers, what can we tweak, what can we change to make sure we hit that target.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
I know, and we provided in your packet Parks and Rec has come up with a little dashboard report relative to the different programs and departments and divisions within Parks and Rec, and, just shows what some of their recovery and subsidies are in that. I know they're gonna work to expand that, and if you all agree to pass the policy on the cost recovery for recreation programs, they'll be developing some reports that will illustrate how we're doing at meeting those goals and what the overall impact might be. And then, of course, the monthly report that you get, that's online and available, that shows it more than just the Parks and Rec Department, but that can kind of show you, that was the year end. That's the best we got available till we've closed the books next month as to where things kind of stood as far as either ahead or behind the proposed budget. So, again, those are some of the reports that we're trying to generate to do there, and some are doing better than others.
I have a question on your pricing policy.
Okay?
On number 4, it says waivers. The Director of Parks and Rec is authorized to waive or discount fees and charges when such action is determined to be in the best interest of agency or city. I think it would be a good idea to have some parameters on that. I don't know what best interest is. And because just so whoever is seeking a waiver, that it's defined if they fall into certain categories. I think otherwise, if it's vague, it can be anybody. And we are a pretty friendly group, and we may say yes to a whole lot of them that you say, or you might even say yes, because it's often based on different things when we don't define best interest or what exactly would be characterized as something that would be considered for a waiver or discount fee.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about some scenarios. Some of that would be like refunds or waiving of a fee if extenuating circumstances, like with weather. If for example, we had a fire alarm go off at the skating rink, and so we gave some money, gave some tickets out. That's kind of a waiving of the fee. Maybe another, like a pool situation where weather would come up, that kind of thing.
You probably can't make a list of every.
Yeah, I
thing
can't.
that
It's
would
just,
come
it's
up.
one of those just
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
odd situation.
I think my fear is a lot of people may request it if it's there. And so I don't know how, maybe just put it into practice and see how it works out. But I know in the past, people would say, can you waive, in other areas of our
Yeah.
departments, can you just waive the water fee? Or can you waive this fee or that fee and this fee and this fee? And so I just want to make sure
Okay.
we're,
Some rhyme or reason to it.
if you're trying to do that cost recovery phase, it
Sure.
should be, that's our focus.
Yeah,
Just
So.
don't put that on the application.
there you go, right. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. As mentioned to Ron before, I think, you've got to empower the staff to make some decisions, and you can't have, all kinds of constraints, and if it goes wrong, then we can change it.
right.
But
Right.
but until it becomes a problem, I'm all for it, and I think your plan's well thought out from the budget standpoint, as far as I can see. And I also think that, if you can get that ingrained in the culture of everybody, which I think you're trying to do, I think your numbers are realistic. It's not like sometimes, management will give you a mission impossible.
Right.
I got that a lot in some previous jobs.
Yep.
And this doesn't look like a mission impossible. It looks like it's attainable. And so I think you can probably get everybody behind it, and it's only gonna work if the entire staff, feels like ownership of it.
Right, absolutely.
And I think you're headed in the right direction. Very impressed.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? There's no public to chat, so.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep, thank
Yep,
you.
we've heard good things about your work, so.
Oh.
Keep it up.
Thank you, appreciate it. Tell my boss,
Okay.
tomorrow,
Well, if you're still here next week, we'll.
thank you.
He's
Okay.
doing good.
All right. All right, Ron,
All right.
we'll move on to the city manager briefing.
A few updates. One of the things that we've had in the past is we have a AUSA membership as an organization, and as part of that, it runs out the end of April of every year, and we currently have 5 slots with our membership. We currently have 2 staff and 3 commissioners that, and we have to name folks individually, and so that's currently Linda, Yusha, and John that are the members, and they get some monthly magazines and some information, and so as we renew this, I think it's a little bit less if we only have 2, and so that's a little bit more difficult, and it wasn't a big jump. I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers handy, but it wasn't real significant to have a 5, and we don't have to have 2 staff either if there's all 5 commissioners want to do it, so.
Well, I've got a corporate membership, which
And I thought that was the case.
I'm gonna maintain, so
Okay.
you can keep, give my spot, keep it somewhere else.
Yeah, I won't be doing it
Right, and so if the remaining 3 want to be signed up, happy to,
I got individuals, so.
okay, all
Yeah.
right. We
I mean, if someone else wants to have it and to take a lower number, I'm fine not doing it. If we have an open spot, then yeah, I will, so I'm kind of
So
open
how
either way.
does that relate to going to the AUSA conference? Do you have to be a member probably
You
to
do.
attend?
Yeah,
And so that by itself, if you don't ever think you'd want to go to the AUSA conference, then
I
we
mean, I
wouldn't
might
want you,
become a
but.
member on my
Oh,
own,
that's-
as
yeah.
a different, in a different capacity.
So, so that's the only thing to kind of keep into
Yeah.
consideration, that if we make it too small, then that's gonna be potentially limit who
well,
can,
we'll look at it, and
yeah.
Just simply have one membership and make it the mayor, because the mayor normally goes to the ASA conference, that would cover that. Even though this year we wouldn't need it because you're already a member, but, you know.
Well,
you
what
can-
I
but
hear
you can-
is-
Can you do that and just say mayor, mayor pro tem, and then that way?
no, you have to name the individual, you get an actual membership card and the
I
whole
think it's
bit.
good to have 2 or 3 people go.
Okay.
It's,
So-
yeah, Junction always has all their commissioners go.
What I'm hearing is at least John and Linda, you're willing to continue serving?
Sure.
Obviously.
Yeah,
And so
And it's year by year?
it is year by year,
Sure.
yeah.
and then you're automatically part of the chapter activities. Okay, thanks for that.
I think it's important that this commission have this relationship with Fort Riley and the Army. So I want to do my part.
Sure.
And it's in August, it's in October?
October, yeah, it always conflicts with
So it's still not after.
Kansas League of Municipalities Conference.
That's usually the second week in October.
Yeah. The other item that I wanted to bring up specifically, just as a topic, is y'all had some discussion at our last meeting of public comments about parking in Aggieville. And kind of the next steps there, if you want to have a discussion at a future meeting for some presentation. And I heard a couple folks say they'd like to see some of the data we have to date, which we can certainly provide, and whether or not, do you want DMI to officially weigh in on what you heard from has their position changed from the 2-hour, and the fees they supported for employees parking? I guess I'm just needing some feedback from all of you
Yeah.
on how you want to proceed with that particular issue and the rates and so on and so forth.
I was gonna say, DMI is very different than Aggieville in this instance, because there's just so much construction going on in Aggieville. So I think that's my concern, but,
I
we
think
had-
Ron misspoke. The ABA
I mean, I'm
Board
sorry.
of Directors
I
to,
said,
Not DMI.
I said DMI, I meant ABA.
Okay, because that's good.
Thank you.
Well, then I do think ABA needs to be present for that meeting, along with all the people that were here, because it seems like it was not communicated well. We received different information, so.
Well, I think, I don't want to overreact. And I had lunch with Dennis last week after the meeting, and he had proposed just like, well, he had thrown out cutting the part-time from 25 to 15 till the end of the summer. I said, well, how about 15 till the end of the school year, till May? I don't want to, upset the whole system. And and as I was talking with other people too, it's like, who is actually, if we're making, we can't be making most of our money. I'd be curious to see where our money's coming in from. Is it the overnight $8 on the weekend? People are generating most of the money. Is it the part-time employees? Is it the shoppers that stay for 3 hours instead of 2 and only pay for the 1? Does anybody have any idea what the kind of breakdown of that
Well,
income is?
Well, I think we need to
Yeah.
get the data, which I'd say for the big thing for the next meeting is to have it. But the other thing, because, Win and I were over at the ABA lunch after, that meeting, and a lot of the conversation was, well, who's really saying there's an issue? Because we're saying we're gonna lower that till after the construction. Well, for the employees, how much does that really matter? It's the businesses that are gonna pick up business after the construction. So are we gonna make it cheaper forever? And the one thing I think to watch for too, if all of a sudden it's really low or free, are we gonna have a full-up parking lot because kids are gonna get a part-time job so they can park in the parking lot all day long while they're in class? Because I know it's hard for us to enforce that part-time deal.
Well, and you have to register. So, I
No, I know you do.
whether even if it's free, we have to account for them, or if it's a reduced price. So
But we
you
can't-
can't really distinguish between students, like they wanted you to, and a part-time employee or a full-time employee. So those employee rates, they have to register in our system. We can't issue this placard or something
But you
like
can't
that.
limit them to only 4 hours a day or anything free every day either.
It's a certain rate, right?
Yeah. it's,
Right, but my understanding is that if someone's real obvious, maybe we can catch them by spending a lot of time in that garage if they have a part-time, sign up. But it's not that easy to do.
They still have to register their vehicle. They have to provide evidence that they're part-time, which is
Oh, no,
30 hours
no,
or
right, no,
less.
I'm not saying that they're not part-time. It's
Yeah,
just that's just a parking pass for them all the time to
Right.
use once they do. And I can see a lot of students saying, this is a great deal.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get a job a few hours a week to be able to use that garage.
We're able to monitor if you have someone who has a part-time pass and they're parking in the garage for 80 hours a week, even though they're a 30.
Right, if they're doing
employee. So we do have that ability.
Super big, but, and I'm sorry, I can't remember our parking officer's name, but.
Adrian.
But been talking to her, the explanation I got was, it's not that easy to figure out unless they do something like 80 hours a week.
some
Yeah.
outlier.
We do have some data that we can provide you. Just offhand, Adrian's been able to provide us some numbers. Garage has been open for about a month now. We've had, just from the hourly transaction, we've had 1,700 transactions occur of people parking in the garage. Adrian will tell you that we're losing a lot of money on that extra hour. So, and she'll keep providing that information to you all as we keep evaluating. But we have over 60 people who have already purchased full-time employee permits, about 16 who have purchased part-time permits, and that number might be low because they're waiting to see if any changes occur. And then 21 residential permits. So from a revenue standpoint, we make more money based off of the reserve stall that we're selling through a reserve stall or a permit, because that's a customer that's in there frequently.
Well, I think the best solution for this is a separate tip jar down at the Blue Stem Bistro for tips for employee parking passes. And I think that would probably solve the problem almost as well as us upsetting everything. So I don't really, I wanted to kind of buy us some time to get more information and then to maybe see if the whole thing might blow over just a little bit. But yeah, I don't think we need to try to do a whole lot of big changes simply because
Really, it comes down to what is it that the public or you all want to change? Is it related to the part-time employee? Is that kind of the crux that we heard during the public comments, and to what willingness are we wanting to change that? We'll tell you that either way, there's going to be a permit program that an employee is going to need to prove that they need to pay. They're going to need to register their license plate. And if that is free, then we're doing all that work for nothing, and no one's paying to park in the garage, and we're going to track that information over time and let you know the delta that the general fund is picking up to operate the garage, because we're still going to have to do everything that we're doing, whether you allow one subset of a population to park at a discounted rate or a free rate or what have you. So that rate resolution that you all passed for the garage, that section gives Adrian the authority to set those rates. So, she has established the reserve stall rates, the full-time employee rates, the part-time rates. So if there's direction from a majority of the commission to compromise in any of those areas, you can provide that feedback and we can move forward with it. But we can also provide you the information. Our recommendation will continue to be, what we have in front of you and what we've talked about and vetted with the business district for some time, which is the $40 for the full-time and the $25 for the part-time. But so we're open to that feedback and direction.
Yeah, you see, my concern is, we can have another discussion, about this, but, we said we're gonna review it in about 6 months. So I wouldn't expect to have it immediately. And I mean, listening to that meeting the other day, it sounded like sky was falling because of the clientele we had here, at the time. But I'm interested in, that data that Adrian can provide, which would be one thing. Secondly, and I asked this of Dennis and the Aggieville group, and he sent me some information on their view on parking, and so did Gina, so I have those 2 documents. I might share those with you. And, but what I would want is for Aggieville to tell us, okay, how many employees need parking in the garage? Because some don't. Some of those businesses have their own. So I'd want to know that number. There's got to be a defined number. Then secondly, what hours? Because they're not all working the same hours. So they may have to break it into 4-hour blocks. I asked Dennis to put together a spreadsheet, with that. And then, can they do a survey of the business owners and ask them how many of you are willing to pay for your employees? And they can, the answer would be yes, no, or I'm not gonna tell you, I understand that. Some people may not want to divulge, that information. But we need to quantify that. And then the other thing is, that they're claiming that, okay, we can't retain businesses, but like as John said, if I'm a part-time KSU student, this is actually an advantage to pay for that, because now I can park and go to class, and as long as it's not there 80 hours a week, they're not going to know that. And so there's actually, it could be a retention plus to say, hey, you can buy this pass, and if you're a student, you don't have to pay KSU parking fees. And I don't know what those are. So that would be, a nice number to have also. And so we need to quantify all that, and what Dennis sent me also was a long-range thing, because as Commissioner Reddy said, the construction goofs that all up on. And they're talking about, okay, how many people park at City Park? We're going through, checking that, and then which side streets, and of course, after, 5 o'clock, you can park on the street as long as you want till 3 a.m. So, that's the other thing that I find interesting. Like if I was working down there, I could come to work at 3 o'clock and leave my car parked on the street until 3 a.m. and I would not get a ticket, based on the way our current things are. So I think that, some of the things that I heard the other night, a little bit extreme. A little bit extreme.
And things like they don't feel safe walking, well, that's, charging less for a parking permit ain't gonna fix that. Where somebody feels, they don't feel safe walking through Aggieville or something, and so that's gonna be there no matter what you're paying for parking, so. And I don't know, what is our current, are people allowed to park in the city park on Friday and Saturday nights?
Yes. So you might recall, before the garage opened, we were trying to limit some of the parking in the city park. You either have, so you have reserved parking for, if you have a fuchsia tag, which is really targeted towards more of the apartments and folks that live in that particular area, and then have used city park. So there's special zones there in the north part of the park that you have to have a fuchsia tag, as well as on Fremont. That area of Manhattan, we had originally pegged for time zone, similar to Aggieville. However, after the garage, that was pre-garage. After the garage opened, we did away with that. And so you can park in the park and walk to Aggieville like you've always done. without restrictions. If you can't leave it there overnight without a fuchsia tag.
Technically, our ordinance for City Park is no parking 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., but we don't have anyone
Unless you have a
enforcing that, and
fuchsia tag.
RCPD does, unless you're a fuchsia, but we don't have anyone enforcing at 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Yet,
So
yet, right, no, I'm just kidding.
But I think, you know, I feel like I gave my word to look at it again and to really revise it, to see how it looks. And I think having the data in front of us is going to be helpful. But that's data that's based on what we said they must do. And so there was this obligation that this is the only way we're going to do it. There wasn't this option of, oh, they're going to review it maybe in, you know, after we speak. And I feel like at least I gave them my word that we would look at it. And I think if they said $10 or $15 or something, I would rather look at that, because there is so much construction going on. It's ridiculous, and I don't want anybody to think that it's easy to navigate or easy to find a parking spot, or it's just a big headache, and it's all of that. It's not very conducive for somebody who wants to work in Aggieville right now. It's easier to work anywhere else but Aggieville. So I don't want it to dampen anybody's spirits that continues to want to work there, so I want to look at that. And even at the airport, we made that so little. Is it $5 a day or something to park all day at the airport? I mean, that's negligible. You won't find $5 anywhere to park for a day. When we looked at our pool fees a few years ago, we had to revise all of that because we had a room full of people saying, no, don't do that. And even this reflects the pool changes we made at that time. So I think it's just good advice to listen to who was in here in the room and do what's in their best interest, but also in the garage and in Aggieville. Right now, Aggieville, I mean, I feel so bad for Aggieville, just with all the construction that's going on, and I feel like it needs a little bit of break for a few more months.
Yeah, I think the real big complaint was there's just no surface parking anymore, and so we have to park in the parking garage. And half of the annoyance is having to park in the parking garage, and then the other half of the annoyance is having to pay to park in the parking garage. It's just, there's no convenient parking within 56 yards of where you would go to work.
The complaint is, we now enforce the street parking, you can't just come out and move your car a few feet, you don't
Yeah.
have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Right, and the individual that were using the surface lot, if they wouldn't have moved their car and they had got a ticket, they'd have paid $15 for one incident.
Exactly.
And we've gotten a couple emails, I think the whole commission got one this week, where, you know, even DMI, people are crying down there that, oh, we've changed it. No, we haven't changed it, we just started enforcing it better. And I replied to that and said, you know, here it is, and there's all kinds of adequate parking downtown, but people are still, you know, making noises about that. You just have to know which lots, and I know everybody's saying it hasn't been communicated, but my goodness, you know, DMI's put on Facebook numerous times, Aggieville has, it's on the city website. It's more a case of people just don't worry about it until they get a ticket. Then they make it an issue, but I'm fully convinced we've done our best to communicate it. I don't know how to do it any better. But before we have this meeting, and I agree with Usha, we should have another meeting, but let's not have it till we have the data. You know, from the business associations, from the garage, all that, because it's not gonna do us any good to just speculate on what ifs. We need to have some numbers to crunch.
Put it on the April work session.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it'll be April, but we'll look at the data, and is there interest in some kind of survey, asking ABA to do some survey work as well as part of that data, or not?
Well, I think you could reinforce that. I mean, I asked Dennis to do it. Now, whether they will or not, because I know that, you know, the business association down there and I've talked to a couple of them individually, that they're sort of split on that. You've got a couple that are one way, and you got some others that think our policy is absolutely sound. But we do need a survey. It'd be nice to say, okay, there's 20 business owners, and 3 of them think this is ignorant, and we need to give them free parking for employees, and the rest don't. I think that's valid, you know, for people to see that.
I don't know if it's just the businesses, it's also the students. I think because if we had, you know, if you had Blue STEM, obviously their manager was okay with them being here, you know, representing, whether it's from Super Cup, whatever it is. So I think the businesses may have said, this is your money, these are your parking spots, you need to go out and speak at the city commission meeting, you need to take ownership of it. And I think that's what we saw. Surveys can be done a variety of ways, and you can only put so much input into what you get back from the survey. But the data we have, and just looking at I mean, how Aggieville is going to transition through Midtown and that whole handicraft corner being gone and all of these parking spaces. It's just a very, I don't know, a sad space if you're going to go there and park or work there right now. And I would like to at least look at making it a little bit easier. So I guess we can do a survey. There's only so much you're going to get out of a survey, I suppose.
So we don't really have the ability to do the survey. It does get
We could
back to
ask-
Aggieville. I will say, when you write a survey question about if you want to pay for something, I could give you the results of that survey. I think I know
Which rate would you like to
what
pay?
the answer is going to be. This is just to, kind of look at it from the macro level. The surface lots are gone. We have an Aggieville garage, which is the main source of parking for the district. That was the vision, and that's what it's going to be in the future. We're not going to get more surface parking lots or more on-street stalls as construction progresses in Aggieville. So this is the garage and the source for parking for the future of the district and any other additional parking infrastructure projects that occur if you talk about a second garage or something like that. And this is, what we brought forward to you for the 2023 budget. It's a $500,000 annual expense. And the rates we recommended were to maintain that garage and keep it as pristine as it can and hope that it lasts 50 years. So I understand that the pains that people are going through now and that it's new, but we are bought in, and we're going to continue to, as staff, we're going to continue to provide you the data, the numbers, and the gaps that we're missing if we change these things. So,
And our construction's gonna continue, for several years.
Right.
So we're gonna have some construction inconveniences,
No matter
there's no
what.
question
And we're
about
gonna
it.
start some in downtown too.
But I'm not interested in you asking, doing a survey of ABA. I want them to provide us the
Yeah.
data.
Yeah.
And I've talked to them, and if they won't do it, then fine.
Okay.
But I think they've got to come forward as a business district and lay this out as honestly, as they possibly can. Because, I agree, surveys are, depends on how you analyze them, but that's also true on a commission meeting. When you get 60 people with one mindset that come in, you're not really getting the whole picture. And that's what I'm concerned about. I want to be able to stand back and say, here's all sides of it before we come up with some determination. And one of the things when I thought about the business district, if you're a business owner, should your employees get free parking? Well, you might be able to make a case as a business owner and say, I pay property tax. It goes into the TIF. I paid for the garage. Indirectly, you're hurting my employees, so therefore they should park for free. And I don't know if anybody's looked at the data on that. Because that TIF thing's important, and what is it doing to feed there? So I was looking at it from the standpoint, if I owned a business, could I make a case to say, you owe me free parking?
Well, the only,
Because I've contributed more to the garage than anyone else. And I don't know, none of them have done that, but
Well,
that's,
I would-
I'm interested in that too.
Again, it's the increment.
it's
and
only,
the
the courtyard's
increments-
the only one that can make
And
that.
I would argue the increment, the big projects are helping to really underscore the major costs. Everybody's other incremental increase is likely contributing to the new connections we're making, all the streetscape improvements, and they're probably not even getting there.
You didn't
As
have
an
anyone
existing
from,
business.
you didn't have anyone from Stone Cold Creamery here because they're paying for their people's parking.
So-
That's just all the different nuances, I think, that are, sort of important to that. Can a business owner make a case? Should business owners pay? Can you go and just up the bid fees and say, that'll cover it? Well, nobody suggested that.
Or they'll ask for more
There are other
Econo
ways to handle it.
Or CVB money.
It's also hard to make sure that all the parties are represented.
Yeah.
So when we hear Aggieville business leader come and say, we support it wholeheartedly, meaning the parking garage, they're mostly one faction, the bar owners, and not necessarily the retail people, and not necessarily some of the more service industries. So it's hard to assure that everyone is represented. I just say that.
Which is why what Dennis has got to do is to come forward and say, okay, I've surveyed, just as an example, the 20 businesses in Aggieville, and 10 think this is a good idea, 4 don't care, and just lay it out, so that we actually know the numbers, because you're absolutely right. You can't just say, okay, ABA supports it. How did that work? 51% vote? I mean, I'd like to really see, precisely what it is, because clearly a couple of them don't like it.
And it's
Some
always,
do, and he's got to come clean with that.
and it's always at the last minute, at the last vote, when we're ready to set the price on something, that the appeal comes from a larger group. I'd like to ask about the downtown parking garage. Are we enforcing, are people paying for it now?
No.
Is there a time frame for that?
We're analyzing it. It's going to need a lot of equipment. So
Yep,
that's, I think
there's a
she's
capital
targeting that
improve-
in the CIP, right?
There's a capital cost to outfit the downtown garage with the license plate recognition software and cameras that we have in Aggieville. We do want to pursue that and have conversations with downtown over the next 6 months to start looking at that area. You really got to look at the garage. It's different than Aggieville because we're going to need to create relationships with the Hilton, with those businesses around there, the hotels, all of their surface lots surrounding the Holiday Inn, Blue Earth Place are owned by the city. So
No.
We were restricted.
it's certainly
from being
something that we want to do because
We were
that's an
restricted
area
from
that
being
needs
able to
that
charge
enforcement.
for rentals. So
Yeah.
if somebody wanted to buy a slot, they even make conversions now where you can put secure garages within the parking garage. Since you have some apartments in the area, there might be folks interested in that. We couldn't do that. We couldn't be, while it was under Star bonds. Now that those bonds have been paid off, I think we can. So those are some of the options where you could come out with a full portfolio of charges and rates for different types of activities.
I have it third hand, it's not directly, that a family member stayed in the Hilton and was charged $10 for parking for that overnight. And I just wondered, that's why I wondered if we're charging the any charge. And so maybe it's how the bill,
we've been notified from members of the public about that, and that's just the Hilton adding a
they're
extra
adding.
fee.
I think
That's
they
not,
charge to park on their property as well, so it's a parking fee.
Yeah,
That's what my.
They don't really designate where you park.
well,
My understanding is it's not the garage, it's the parking lot behind it that they
Right.
own. And they charge people $10 to park in there, because I checked on that with Everett a while back.
what this person said was that the person was asked, did you park in the parking garage? And the answer was yes. And then they got the $10 charge.
And a-
So it's hearsay, I agree,
Yeah,
it's 3 times removed, so I just wanted to ask. I'm glad we had this discussion, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I think it's it's an unlevel playing field between downtown and Aggieville, and I think that's what's so
They're different.
frustrating, when they say free Aggieville garage, free downtown garage, I understand why. It's not like I don't understand what's going on.
For now.
But the perception from the community and everybody else that's paying, that's not what they're saying. They're saying, we don't have to pay here, we have to pay here. And I think we need to try to fix it somehow. And I know it's going to be hard, but Aggieville is going to be under construction for a long time, and they're going to be paying, a lot of those businesses aren't getting any customers already. And it just looks like a never-ending cycle, and it looks like we're just piling it on because we have to get it done right now, or while it's under the TIF district, so. I don't know, I feel like we need to look at this.
All right, appreciate that feedback. Just a few meetings to bring you up to speed on. The joint city-county meeting is canceled this month. There was a lot of competing events that were happening with that. Riley County had asked for a presentation on the animal shelter again, and I didn't feel like there was adequate time for us to prepare for that, for this meeting, plus the conflict, so we've agreed to do that in March. And I think, it's our turn to host then. So, and then Pot County, they want to invite Pot County. I know they were in on that prospect too. I don't know. and they're looking at, what, an update on the animal shelter, which we obviously, that was one of the topics that we discussed, and we don't have any finite plans, but we continue to have discussions, and I think we could talk about, I mean, if nothing else, if we can say, hey, we like this relationship, but we really need a memorandum of understanding, and what do you want us to do in your county? And they're both different. I mean, really, the county's fee is for a resident of the county to bring the animal to our shelter. That's not what, and it's a lot, they're paying a lot more. That's not what our agreement is with Potawatomi County. It's a different setup, and we don't patrol either one unless it's a particular case. And so having that relationship and that memorandum of understanding, we're almost like a social service agency asking for funds with no direction as to what that's actually meant to be for. So those are some of the things we need to work out.
So you gotta work with them then.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, we're targeting that. The other thing that's come up is that third Thursday is spring break, and so we're targeting the fourth Thursday, and there's actually 5 Thursdays. So
For the
we're targeting the 23rd
For the city, county?
for the city, county, and that's tentative, but that's kind of the discussions we've had for that. So plan is to have it in March, and that's the primary item for discussion. There's Good Morning Manhattan Thursday that some of you have RSVP'd for, the annual chamber celebration. I think you're all going to that. We're not noticing it. It's a social event. It's not really designed to talk about city business as opposed to the retreat, which is something where city business can, please don't sit together, mingle together, all that kind of stuff. Intergov is the 20th. And the MRC luncheon is March 1st. The only other thing that popped up as a kind of a reminder is the deadline for early registrations for the National League of Cities Congressional Cities Conference is this Friday. It's March 26th to the 28th. I know there's been some stuff out there. I don't know if anybody's interested in going to that or not. So,
Is this the one that you say that we typically have the most interest in?
historically, we
Historically.
do the Washington DC.
Yeah, this
True.
one.
Is there particular things we need to go lobby our people in DC for that we can't lobby their people here in town for?
Housing money.
I mean, there's always typical things. Nothing pops into my mind right away, but I mean, there's always a laundry list of things that we could certainly come up with to make that productive.
Kind of had apple cart upset on a lot of the issues.
Yeah. Okay, think about that. It's not a huge amount more to wait till the next deadline, which is almost right up to the conference. Goes from 650 to 775. Planning chart.
Just to say that I won't be going
Okay.
to the NLC. I just went to the one in Kansas City that was more local, and I appreciated that opportunity. I appreciated not spending so much.
Sure. For the 21st next week, the general agenda items is the MCM landing, or the business park there at the airport, that they're requesting first reading of the ordinance for that, as well as the annexation agreement. So this is the first reading of the annexation ordinance, as well as the agreement asking for annexation. I think the appeal time for the county's action, where they concurred with your resolution of intent to annex, runs out Thursday. So assuming there's no formal appeal to that, this will stay on that agenda. If there is appeal, then this would have to move until that's resolved. We have a land purchase agreement on Amherst. This is for the training space for the fire department. They're just behind their fire station. We've reached an agreement with that property owner for utilization of that land.
How many acres?
We're 14, 12, 16?
Something like that.
Where would the money come from for something like that?
So probably a variety of sources, but
Okay. rummage around in some cookie jars and see what we got. Okay.
The first reading of the commission vacancy to call for the election to replace the
Well, I know we wanted to get an answer to a question. I didn't know we were putting something to vote on.
So I think there's been enough preliminary discussion about it's that the commission can put an item on the ballot for the additional commissioner to serve for the vacancy if they want to as part of the regular election. I think that's been,
Yeah, we'd asked the question, could we say pick 4, or was it pick 3 and pick 1? And we wanted to get the answer to that.
But, so what is Katie, Katie has poked around on it and come up with this.
yes. Yeah, I
As-
think
as
this
the solution
this would
to that.
allow us to pick 4, and one of those would be for the remainder. of
Okay,
that
I
term.
didn't think we had decided to put it up to a vote. I know we wanted to find out the information
Okay.
for it. I'm not sure which way I want to go on.
This tells us the information is yes, we can do.
Yes, yeah.
So we'll,
And then you'd actually, after the ordinance is passed, you'd actually have to call a resolution for the question. Just like if we were putting a special question on that ballot.
so this
You
is
have to
just
follow
gonna,
that procedure
Now,
specifically.
do are we just setting a,
this is just.
we
giving
can't,
us
we
the
can't
This
call
just
for that
gives you
election
the
until we have a
authority.
vacancy.
This is just giving you authority for the vacancy. It's a vacancy policy as well, so,
Right,
yeah, I may
which we could always turn around and change later if we wanted to.
do that as well.
I think I'm ready to move forward on it.
Okay?
Yeah, keep it on there for now. If we don't like what we see, we'll tell it or bring.
Table it or vote it down or do whatever.
Yeah, that's true. It can be tabled, voted out, or voted down,
Yep.
3 options.
All right, on the consent agenda then, we've got resolutions there for the park and rec fees we just talked about, our boards and committee policy that we had the work session on, and then South Juliet is back on, so we do have a small issue on one side, and so what we're doing, when we sold those tracks together, and we had 3 bids on the east side, 1 bid on the west side. The contract, and the high bidder was the same for both sides. So we put that all together in one nice contract. However, as we're working up the deeds and everything, we had to provide a clean site. So the testing on where we had, and part of that was we had to extract our fuel tanks on the west side. There's a little bit of contamination. We think it's very minimal, and we think it's probably just from overflows and that sort of thing. The report we got back was pretty minimal, but there will be a delay in us being able to close on that site. And the owner wants to be able to already utilize the east side on the regular schedule. So we're splitting the 2 sites. Same amount of money, there's no change in that, it's just delaying the closing on the west side to take care of we find out if we have to remediate or not. We don't even know that we have to remediate, so. But they didn't want to delay the whole thing. They want to go ahead and close on the other side. So, and they're fine with delaying on the other side. So that's why that's back on.
They paid what we wanted.
Yes.
I'm happy to divide the
Absolutely.
sale.
And then we'll have we did, I think we have favorable terms for the Arts in the Park services, both on the equipment as well as on the concert services and the promotions and the sponsoring and all of that. So I think we feel pretty good about that and are bringing forward a recommendation. Right now, it looks like that's likely going to occur with less than what we've done before, funding-wise, so. Just got a final plat there on McCall Landing, and I think that's that vacant lot
East of the.
east of Wagyu, yeah. And then,
Who is it?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
We've got some bank stabilization work at the wastewater treatment plant. We've got the concrete panel replacement on Fort Riley Boulevard to award. We've got a good bid there. We want to appoint the ADA advisory group that Jared's talked about to advise you all on some recommendations in that regard. Continue the special assessment ordinance, and then to have the first reading to establish the Community Support Funds Advisory Board.
CISFAB.
There you go.
What is the outfall bank stabilization?
It's just some erosion that's occurred there
But
where
it's not got to do with the levy?
it does not. No, it's something we've had in our CIP.
Okay, okay. I can't envision another bank.
So it does, it's our, where our pipe goes through the levee.
Okay.
And it's our, a combination of things. Part of it's the pipe that goes through the levee that puts the clean water into the river from the wastewater treatment plant. Another part is where we pump under the river over to the biosolids farm. So there's just some erosion that occurs there that we need to stabilize.
Thank
that.
you. I
That
just-
wasn't part of the levee project.
Just wondered, thank you.
So on the 7th, then, of March, we've got general agenda. We've got the Manhattan Area Technical College would like to come talk about some funding potential.
I know what they want from the state.
Yeah. Actually,
not that much.
I've got the same question.
I think
all
he
do.
I just saw that.
about half a mil. We have that.
Yeah, I think there, right now, there's a couple of things that they just want to visit about. But part of it is they're short right now on the project that they broke ground on. And that most of that's trying to be financed through traditional methods, and they're looking for some support or letters of credit to be able to make up their gap. And I think that's about 600,000. They're not necessarily asking all of us for that. And then longer term, he's looking at some kind of funding parameter that helps give them some funds, and they'd like to see it from all three taxing jurisdictions. Or, you know, and maybe a concept of a mill, but
Well, their
Maybe something
concept
that-
trouble is they asked for Riley County and Manhattan City, and probably they're double dipping, so it's not like it's three entities to get money
so
from.
the way it's been explained to me is that if each of the taxing jurisdiction put in a little bit, if the goal was, we want 2 mills and everybody put in 2/10 a year till you got there.
But everybody is at Manhattan, Riley, and what, Potawatomi, so Riley,
I
Manhattan
think right
citizens
now
get
it's
double
just-
dipped on the,
It's just the USD 383S, and, you know, it gets
well,
back
then
to-
it's the same person getting it every single,
It is, but, you know, instead of one entity giving all of it, it's
well, go to Geary
Splitting.
County, go to Potawatomi County.
it's where their facilities are located. Anyway, that's part of what their discussion is. It's a discussion, it's not an action item. And then, clerk of the municipal court. Oh, those are together. Hello. Fee adjustments in our customer service and city clerk. I'm not sure what that is. I'll find out tomorrow at staff meeting. Somebody added this
Today.
since the last time I looked at
Is
it.
that March 7th?
Yes.
That's probably just the first placeholder for the fees discussion that Jason had outlined at the last work session on fees. So that'll be the first opportunity where we're going to bring forward some fees that we're looking to update. And I think those are some
Oh,
of
yeah,
the
okay.
those are some of the
And
departments
it's
that
a
we're
discussion.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what it is, you're right. Then on the consent, we've got, again, second readings of some of the annexations and the fund. We got Fremont improvements that were part of the transit grant that we got to spend it or lose it. So that's some of the things that are going on there. We also have some utility improvements while we've got that road tore up as part of that. And then we've got some concrete panel maintenance on our regular concrete program. Work sessions on the 28th, we've got a look at the Human Rights and Services Board and Partner Cities. And then, as we talked about in your retreat, we'll have Baker Tilly here to talk about looking at our economic development policies and practices, as well as our development review process, and we want to talk to them about what they can do in our housing incentives program too. They've done some work in that particular area. They're working for the city in Lawrence right now on some of that, and we think it would help maybe guide some of our longer, broader discussions for how we might be able to look at our incentive program as it relates to housing.
Has the Housing Steering Committee met?
They have, and they've started some of that discussion, but at the same time, they're also looking at some direction, which I think this will help us to frame some of that. There's been some state programs that are out there, and there's a lot of, I think,
A lot of
lack of
housing programs.
concrete knowledge about how those work. You know, on one of them, the city has to be the applicant with a developer in tow. So how are we gonna distinguish that? You know, just first come, first serve? I mean, I don't think it's really necessarily anything out of our pocket necessarily. But how are we gonna prioritize when we make an application? So,
Housing
And also,
101.
we talked about like, trying to think of the exact wording of it's like a survey or see where we have opportunities within the community for different revitalization zones.
Right.
To say where we could hit. And like, if we were to do something like with choice neighborhoods, could we qualify for that? And we need a particular area in that community support in it to do. And again, getting more knowledge about that program, because they take a lot of, it's not a 6-month deal. It's
So-
a multiple-year deal to get them going.
if you've heard of the Rural Housing Incentive Program, RHID. So that's really a program that's designed for a developer who assumes all the cost of the development, including the infrastructure. And so our specials that we do really already provide that incentive, a lot of that incentive. So it isn't really anything that the developer forgoes. So I'm not sure our HID is even gonna work here because of our special assessments.
Plus, that's more greenfield development.
It is.
And we don't have a lot of that
And
necessarily.
could be potentially redevelopment, it's just nobody's really ever tried it for that. And there might be better tools to use other than that. But those are some of the discussions that we want to have moving forward.
But Ron, as I was thinking about that, I get the thing on the specials, that would be a new area, but if, it's like John said, if we designated an older part of town which has no specials, and a developer came in there, the problem is that infrastructure was put there so long ago, it's gonna need major redo. Like
Could be.
the sidewalks for one thing, so that I think that might actually work. Because
could.
it wouldn't be in opposed to our specials. It would be taking the old brick sidewalks out, putting concrete in, maybe upgrading the pipes, all those things.
Yeah.
And that program might work in a designated area.
I don't disagree. And again, I would say the practical use statewide of that program, which has been around longer than some of the other programs, has been greenfield development, just because that's where redevelopment typically costs more, and then land assembly's always been the challenge on that. So you've got to have a developer that has control of the land, because the city's not gonna be, you can't condemn or anything like that for those programs. So that's the challenge with a designated area, that, you got 90% of the owners, but you don't have those two key ones in the middle, necessarily. So you really do have to have some kind of incentive program. Okay, so what's the incentive for that owner to sell to a developer? Anyway, so that's some of that discussion that we want to have with you on the 28th. I think it'll be productive.
So,
And then we get into our other housing reviews, our other board reviews.
so
I'm just saying, when we, backing up a little bit, talk about the technical college, I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but if they want a chunk of money, which would be Eco-Devo money, that's where we need to have that reconciliation to how much money do we really have?
We don't have any more.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a question, so I have a couple people that I was gonna point to, a couple of these boards that we're gonna be talking about. The discussion we're gonna have is on what we want them to do and various things like that. None of this discussion is if we're getting rid of these in particular, or is that part of it also? And should I hold up?
No,
It shouldn't be. I mean, these boards, we've went through you all that we believe should continue in some way. I don't think there are any boards or staff liaisons recommending less members on these boards, so please move forward with any appointments that
Okay.
you'd like, yeah.
Okay, got it.
It's really gonna be about the purpose and the
Right.
stuff that you want them
Still
doing. Yeah.
meeting- Okay, got it. All right. Continue.
yep. Again, so from there on, we're really looking at a lot of the board reviews, likely to have some other ones pop up from there, and then get into some CVB and pavement management and cemetery master plan there in May, and then budget stuff, so,
So the first budget meeting won't be till June this year.
right.
Cool. All right.
But then we should have the police department.
One of the things, so that was, we had that discussion at a city-county meeting down at the county. I don't know if everybody was there or not. But we talked about, one concept was that before the law board approved publishing the budget, that there be a work session between the city and county commissions and the law board, just to hear the presentation and ask questions about it and provide that feedback. And I don't know if that's something you still want to do or not. I don't need to know tonight. I mean, there's plenty of time to work that out, but that was something that I think actually the original statute envisioned, was that kind of, it was in-bank meeting for the full commissions to hear the budget, not just the law board, and that there is input from all elected officials that have a say and ultimately have to pass to approve. So they have a better understanding of what's being.
Yeah, I think-
I'm fine
I
with
think
it.
that makes sense, because, in the law board, we end up having to vote on the budget, but we might not always have input from the other commissioners because of these goofy COMA rules. We can't talk about it. And so that would make sense, because then you could get the feel for, how everybody, what their take is on it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that feedback, because that's something that I can talk to my county constituents about, as well as Director Pete, so he's aware of it. Because I think, as I recall, the county commission pretty much gets a full briefing, pretty much monthly from the director, where you tend to, every other month, get a little update. And so,
We went for a
And-
long,
and they
we went
have-
for a long time with none last year.
we did, and so, and granted, a lot of that is on jail expenditures and some of those other costs that they are directly responsible for. And that, I think, is what motivates some of that, but they have some of those broader discussions where I'm pretty sure there's been presentations of the full budget request to the county commission. So by us meeting together, they can do that at the same time.
Yeah, I know in talking to Mike Gillespie, when you look at that statute about when the law board's supposed to decide that budget, that there is some leeway in there. I don't know if it's the word shall or will or something. And also, there isn't any penalty for not doing it. It was always just that it would say it wouldn't look good, or some people would criticize the police department or the law board if it went past that date to do our budget. But I know we can talk about it amongst the law board and see, but there, in theory, we could do it later, but my understanding was, we just might not publicly look good or something, depending on what it was, but there isn't necessarily a penalty that someone could put on it.
Yeah, and it's compounded with the early publication.
Right,
We have to
exactly.
do with the revenue
Yeah,
neutral.
the revenue neutral rate just makes it that much worse.
So it's, I would argue, probably better that it is meeting that date, because that kind of informs that revenue neutral rate that we have to comply with. That was the crazy thing about that, where they actually gave us more time to have year-to-date knowledge.
Yeah.
But yet we had to report earlier on that we were going to exceed the revenue neutral rate. So it's not a great thing. But Anyway, that's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, let's start down there. Linda, anything else we need to know about?
No.
Johnny? Lynn? You good? Yusha?
Yeah, I just wanted to know about Janet Nichols' position. Has it been filled, or where we are on that?
They're slow walking.
No, I think it's been advertised. I can't say 100% for, I've heard that. They sent a job description. I want to say I looked at it and sent it back with some comments about 2 weeks ago.
Okay. All right, yeah, that was the only thing I was worried, because I have some other things to fill out. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Butler and Commissioner Reddy to adjourn the meeting. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Hattasol,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thanks for coming. Go Cat.